God still got me fighting, and there's lots to be done. And at the end of the day, I'm working to have a more peaceful, balanced life on some levels. But I know what's coming in the next 5 years. I got the whistleblowers, I got the data, I got the this, I got the that. And if we don't step it up right now, it ain't going to be good. And so, at the end of the day, the only real legacy that any man can ever leave are his deeds and his children. So I have to do everything I can to try and make sure that my kids have a future. I got to make sure that my deeds reflect that.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
So, we're just going to dive straight in. But listen, Tom, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. My mistake, I forgot to send you a link. That would help. But you were ready. So, Tom, look, you're one of the rare breed of lawyers who have been doing the right thing. And it's cost you your career in business. Now you're a podcaster. You're not too dissimilar from me. A surgeon who's now unable to practice, relying on his work as a podcaster to, make a living and make ends meet. Because you chose the right thing. You chose to help people. And my understanding is you've also helped various people around the world behind the scenes with their legal cases. Can you just tell my listeners and I a little bit more about that? We've had a chat off air, but I'd love to hear your backstory, about what you're doing and how you got here.
Well, it's an interesting thing, right? So I start out, and in terms of the law and in terms of the public world and the things like that, I was just a normal guy. I wasn't a big shot. I was not anything special. I had opened a nice, quiet little private law practice about 6 months before COVID hit, and was going to do local law things, estate planning and maybe some criminal and some this and that and other, just quiet little law stuff, right? Well, COVID hit, and at the time I was working on a master's in health, and for no apparent reason, I just decided to work on another master's degree. And so I started studying this new disease that's in the air, right? It's because it's in the media. There's not a whole lot of new diseases that are making news on a regular basis. So when you see something, you look at it. And you can see behind me, I've got the books, the epidemiology and the biostats. And so I'm looking at this stuff. And I'm looking at the government numbers. And I'm listening to guys like Anthony Fauci out there tell me that the world's going to end. Well, at no point did anyone ever suggest that the case fatality rate was going to be much over 4% with COVID. And that was really a stretch even at the beginning, right? So the case fatality rate was always going to look like it was going to be under 1%. It didn't take a genius to see that. You didn't have to be an epidemiologist. You just had to look at what was out there. Well, if that's the case, then everything started to fall apart immediately, right? Because the original SARS, the original MERS were much, much higher than that, much, much higher. Tuberculosis is a 10% case fatality rate. There's all this stuff, all these different diseases, and nobody cares about them. We live with them every day. Nobody panics. Nobody locks things down. Nobody does anything. And these diseases are far worse. They also have higher reproduction rates in many cases, or similar reproduction rates, which means they spread faster. So I hear Anthony Fauci out there telling me how many millions of people are going to die. And what he was doing was he was looking and saying, if the whole world gets SARS and there's a 1% case fatality rate, this is how many will be dead. Well, that's arguably true. But the numbers are just there to stoke fear. They were never a real thing. So I see the lies and the misleading nature of the media and what they're doing. It's just all garbage. And there was no explanation for it. So I start talking about this, and no one else wanted to talk about it at the time. No one. Doctors weren't saying anything. They were all being just crazy, crazy cautious. Most lawyers hate science, so the lawyers weren't saying anything. The only people that were upset were the people whose businesses were going to get locked down and who were, told to wear masks and things like that. So we, the people, were upset, but there was a huge, huge lack of anything from the medical world. And I was really, really trying to figure out what was going on here, because the amount of silence, and I'm talking really early, right? So really early, there was no Peter McCullough at that point. There was no Mary Tyler Bowden at that point. There were just a whole bunch of people just trying to figure out what's going on, I guess. But the numbers didn't lie. The numbers were never lying. The numbers were always there. And all you had to do was look. You had to click on the asterisk, right? You had to follow the asterisk, because HHS would say, everybody's going to die, asterisk. And then if you follow the asterisk, it says, well, maybe not everybody. So when I saw this, and I saw, what they were doing to my kids, because I got 2 boys, right? And, they want to put masks on them. They want to shut down their schools. They want to do all these different things. I'm just like, we can't have this. And then I had another lady gets a hold of me, and her name was Peggy. And Peggy was the first COVID client I took. And she was before anybody knew my name. This was at the very beginning of the lockdowns, during 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Peggy had just recently finished treatment for stage 4 cancer. Peggy it was necessary that she kept getting her follow-ups and this, that, and other. Well, she had been looking for treatment. She had a rare form of cancer, and she needed treatment out of state. And Peggy has since passed, but she had given me permission to talk about this before she had passed. She couldn't get to her out-of-state appointments because of the lockdowns. This was during the hardcore lockdowns. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything. So we tried to reach out to Governor Mike DeWine here in Ohio to see if we could get an exemption, because he was giving exemptions to all of his political buddies and everybody else right out the go, right? During that 2 weeks to flatten the curve, during that initial lockdown period where everybody was in panic, he was still giving exemptions for all sorts of things, right? But he wouldn't give an exemption for a stage 4 cancer person who was trying to get, a follow-up appointment that was critical for her life. So I start putting these things together, right? The numbers don't add up. There's always an asterisk. The government's giving out favors to their buddies, but not to anybody else. And the media is just dutifully lying. And so I just couldn't look at it, Doc. I couldn't look at it. It wasn't okay. It made me so furious. And I've told this story before. I'm a God guy. I don't care where anybody else is, but for me, I'm a God guy. And I sat right here in this chair, and I put my hands on my head, and I prayed, and I said to God, I said, listen, I feel a fire about this. I feel like you want me to fight this. I said, I'm not qualified. I'm not the right man, but if you put it in front of me, I'll do my best to do it your way. 5.5 years later, I'm still fighting. It's been tough. There's been some ups. There's been some downs. I will say at the end of the day, our work led to some of the biggest and most profound changes to what was happening. I mean, our work helped end the lockdowns, helped end the vaccine mandates, helped to make Fauci step down, helped to bring the truth out that it was created in a lab. We were very, very effective for a nobody from a little town. And so I'm pretty proud of that. But it didn't come without a cost.
I bet. Well, listen, thank you for all your work. And one thing I've noticed just listening to your work, in your Substack and your podcast, you love questioning things. I think that's the key thing. You just question everything. You don't take anything for granted. You don't take it as a given. You just, you're like, whoa, hold on. Let's just ask a few questions about this. And that curiosity of yours has got you in the position that you're in now. And I guess I'm kind of similar to you. One thing that happened in the UK, which I never really understood, I don't know if it happened in America, but in the UK, they downgraded COVID from a highly infectious disease of concern and just before lockdown. And you're just thinking, well, hold on. If you've downgraded it from being highly infectious, consequential disease, why do we need the lockdowns now, which we've never had before? It was. Well,
in the U.S., they kept lying. They kept lying about how dangerous it was. I mean, internally what they did, I don't know. I mean, but if you recall, there was a study that came out in the summer of 2020. The doctor's name is escaping me. He's a world premier epidemiologist from Stanford, and probably one of the top epidemiologists on the planet.
Ioannidis.
Yes, Dr. Ioannidis. And so his study showed that that COVID was going to end up in about the 0.2 to 0.3% case fatality rate. He was right. He ended up being correct. Of course, they tried to pretend that he wasn't, but this is the man, right? This is the guy who, when other epidemiologists, put stuff out, he's the guy that double checks their work. And I mean, he really is absolutely brilliant. So, I'm looking at this. Everybody knew what was going to happen. They just lied. They just lied because they needed to push this out. Now, fast forward, and I'm going way, way out of timeline here. But if you fast forward several years later, you got to ask yourself, well, why would they lie? Why were they pushing this? Well, a few years later, I testified in front of Marjorie Taylor Greene. She had a committee hearing. It was an unofficial committee hearing down in Congress, kind of like Senator Johnson's roundtables. And Congresswoman Greene, invited me down and I spoke. And one of the things that I brought down there, and I put my name, my personal name, on a declaration under penalty of perjury, stating that I had done everything that I felt was necessary to verify what I was presenting. And so what I presented that day was excerpts from verified medical records of a particular soldier who had, in the year 2015, had 5 different records in his medical history, right? And in each of those 5 records, each of those represented another doctor's visit, right? So 5 times he goes to the wellness center, the doctor's, whatever. And in each of those 5 instances, in the year 2015, he received the Moderna COVID-19 vaccination. You can't argue that that's a typo. It literally said Moderna COVID-19 vaccination. So how do you don't have 5 typos, 5 different records, 5 different things, and they weren't all from the same person, right? So I had to protect this guy's identity very, very much. To this day, that identity is not something that I can or would share. But I presented those, and I put my name on a declaration under penalty of perjury, because that was the only way to ensure that it was truthful, to demonstrate that it was truthful, to the best of our ability to find out, and still get this. So how does that happen? Well, that explains a lot if that's true, right? Because we know that Moderna, Pfizer, the big pharma, they were all working very hard. They wanted these gene therapy techs out there, but they couldn't get people to volunteer for tests. They couldn't get people to volunteer for the studies necessary to do it because nobody wanted their genes edited. So this was something that was talked about publicly prior to the COVID nonsense, prior to the mRNA nonsense, prior to everything. There were a number of times. There's a real famous clip of one of the executives. I think it was the CEO for Janssen or something like that, talking about how gene therapy is the future. We can't get anybody to volunteer for the testing though. Well, here's the thing. This tech has been around for a while, but it was never tested. It was never properly developed because nobody wanted their genes edited. And there's a huge risk because, if mRNA does integrate into the genome, which more and more evidence is suggesting that it has and does to some extent, what does that do to humanity on a permanent basis? And that's a real question, right? To this day, nobody's answering it because the FDA is doing the same thing the FDA has always done, which is avoid studying anything that might be uncomfortable, right? That's how it is that we have no real links between autism and vaccines because they won't study it. It's not that it's not there; they just don't want to study it, right? And the studies that are put out are usually industry-based or backed studies that are fake and nonsensical and just based on garbage in, garbage out. So you've got this potentially hugely profitable platform that Big Pharma wants to push in the mRNA and the gene therapy tech, right? Nobody's willing to do it. They've apparently, based on the evidence I presented to Marjorie Taylor Greene, have not only developed COVID as far back as 2015, which is consistent with our findings, right? We know that there was an article in Nature published. We know that the work on SARS-CoV-2 was done in the mid-2010s through EcoHealth Alliance with Ralph Barrick and all these guys in the Wuhan labs. We know all this, right? This is out there. We knew this stuff. And we also know that it's standard in bioweapons development that when you create a disease, you also create the cure. Right? You do it at the same time. So all of this makes sense. If they were working on SARS-CoV-2 at the time in Wuhan, they would probably also have been working on the vaccine at the time. So those two things may have been sitting on the shelf since 2015-ish, maybe even before that. So all this is happening. Fast forward, go back to the original question. What's the impetus here? Why lie? Why lie about COVID? Why lie about all these things? Well, you have to scare people. People aren't going to start taking these gene therapy drugs, especially these untested, unapproved drugs, with no long-term safety testing at all, no real valid safety testing that's even to this day that's actually talked about. Nobody would have took this unless they were scared to death. Well, in our first lawsuit on the lockdowns, we worked with a guy named Dr. Peter Bregan, the brilliant Harvard trained psychiatrist. And we spend a lot of time talking about the interaction between public health and fear. Well, fear is a tactic that's actually studied in the realm of public health as a mechanism to motivate or to push people to do things that they wouldn't otherwise want to do. They've studied how do you scare people into doing what's best for them. Now, what's best for them, is irrelevant. It's irrelevant what they think is best for them. What's best for them is determined by the public health practitioner, what they think. So they use these fear tactics. They use the scare stuff to try and scare people to get them ready for the eventual release of the multi-trillion-dollar scam of the century, the mRNA COVID vaccines. Fast forward from the summer of 2020 to the winter of 2020, where they're getting ready to authorize under EUA these deadly, unsafe, unhealthy vaccines that aren't vaccines. They weren't even tested to determine whether or not they prevent the spread of COVID. And you've got a full almost year of fear and hysteria building in the eyes of the public, backed by a owned media. And suddenly you got people willing to inject things into their children's arms and into their arms that were never tested, never demonstrated to be safe. And we've since found out were absolutely not safe.
Yeah. I mean, I know you said that they were doing these things in the labs and they create these gain of function pathogen disease, and then they create the cure. Some would argue the real bioweapon was the vaccine. There was never a cure. That is the actual harm they wanted to inject into everybody. Now, the question is why? Like you said, it might just be hubris, arrogance. They genuinely believed that what they were doing was right. It might be that we're just one massive experiment for them. It might be that they wanted to try and see if they could kill us. Or maybe it was over time they wanted to make us sick and die off early. Maybe they want to make us infertile. You know what? Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I don't think like them. I don't have the evidence. But I'm open to all of the above possibilities. But it seems really strange to me that you talk about the spike protein being the dangerous part of the virus, and then you make that the thing that the vaccine, so-called vaccine, produces. So the very thing that is the terrible thing about the virus, your body's going to keep creating it and becomes a factory. That doesn't even make sense. And then the questions were, well, how much of this stuff does it make? And how long is it going to be made for? And what is the safe upper limit? Is there a safe upper limit? How do we turn it off? What's the antidote? No one answers these questions. I keep asking about this mRNA shot. Tell me, how does it work? No one's got an answer. So I've got my own concerns about it and my thoughts. I think there were also multiple gains to be involved, not just Big Pharma. It was saving Big Pharma. They've run out of drugs. This is a new pipeline now from which they can just create cancer, autoimmune, childhood vaccines. Everything will be transitioned to mRNA tech. It's easy to produce, it's cheap, and it's a great moneymaker for them. And there's hardly any regulatory oversight now, because now that they've got their products in, they can say, it's just like everything else. It's safe and effective, you know? We just tweaked the sequence a little bit, but essentially it's the same product, so it's safe. We don't need to do the rigorous testing. But they never did do the rigorous testing. It's a sleight of hand. They just slip it through and that's it. No one asks any more questions. You're an anti-vaxxer, are you? God forbid. But I think there were multiple gains, like the financial system. Like this was the largest wealth transfer known to humankind. It bailed out the banks, the teetering financial fiat system that's always in the brink of collapse. It just pumped more, money into the system. A few extra chairs into the game, so that people weren't left standing. And as a control mechanism, introduce digital IDs, digital passports, and just get people used to this authoritarian kind of rule. It was also an experiment to see how far they could push us before we said no. I think there was lots of different, gains from lots of different angles, if you know what I mean. But anyway, you said at one point, you were instrumental in turning around the lockdowns and the mandates. Can you just expand on that a little bit and explain to me what you mean?
Yeah, so we, in early September of 2020, I filed the first the first big lawsuit on this. And we had, I think in the submission, put over 600 pages. And we documented everything, right? And so we brought this in, and under the rules of ethics, there's certain things you got to know. So first of all, one of them is that under certain motions, if a court finds a case to be unplausible, they can just throw it out, right? So what we did was we filed a complaint that was a little bit different and a little bit unorthodox, but followed all the rules. And what it was we front-loaded the complaint with data to demonstrate that it was not only plausible, it was likely. And we did it that way because cases were being thrown out, and the consensus was so tremendously COVID's the end of the world, this, that, and other. And our case said, listen, there's no basis. It's an arbitrary, capricious thing that you've locked down the country. And it was against the lockdowns, right? It was against masking, lockdowns, all the nonsense that was happening. And we said that, based on certain case law and based on certain principles, is arbitrary, capricious action. It's illegal. You're violating all sorts of rights. And so we bring that forth. And it was a very big deal. It created huge waves. And it was the first of its type anywhere. Now, when you file a case like that, and this was not lost on me, the media cannot say you're a liar, right? So when I file a case with the court, I'm certifying to the court that everything I'm presenting I believe to be truthful. So if the media comes out and does a hit piece on me and says that I'm lying, that's defamation per se. Even though it's a public issue, that's defamation. So they couldn't call me a liar. So when we filed the case, it did a couple things. First of all, it had made waves in the court. But second of all, and arguably as importantly or more importantly, it was the first piece of true cited data that was very viral in the media showing that this whole thing was fraud, right? It within that case, we had a bunch of experts and a bunch of data, and all this stuff was filed with the complaint. We had page after page after page of scientific peer-reviewed studies showing that masks don't work. So this whole, do masks work, do they not work? Well, we knew in 2020 they don't work. We could prove it. We had literally dozens of studies going back historically showing masks don't stop viral transmission. I mean, including the N95. So this whole thing was established by fall of 2020. We had demonstrated and showed all the evidence on this. We showed that the lockdowns were doing more harm than good. We showed that there was no basis for it. We showed that SARS-CoV-2 wasn't as dangerous as they claimed it was. We showed everything. Now, this case was a huge, huge threat to the plan, right? This case, when I filed it, the judge who was on this case immediately granted discovery. He designated the case complex and granted discovery. Now, what that shook the world. I got calls from everybody from Bobby Kennedy on down. And the reason is that discovery would have ended this whole thing. There would never have been an mRNA vaccine. And there shouldn't have been. It wasn't an emergency. Everybody knew this. And you're allowed under the law to challenge whether or not an emergency exists. So we're granted discovery. Fast forward, the judge on the case has an ex parte meeting with Governor Mike DeWine's lawyers. Now, an ex parte meeting means that he has a private meeting with the governor's lawyers that I was not a part to as a part of the opposing party. Now, that is an issue. It's a very big issue. That's not something that's okay. The Sixth Circuit actually recognized that this happened. Now, they say that it wasn't a big deal. But here's the thing. After that ex parte meeting, the judge redesignated the case and pulled discovery. So we were no longer able to have discovery. Now, this is a really interesting thing because this is one of the most profound cases going on in the country. It's a huge deal. And we were not just well cited. I mean, we had everything there. To this day, some of the stuff that when people talk about, the mass and stuff, I mean, a lot of that's where all of this originated. This happened before any of the big names that in COVID were doing anything. This was Sherry Tenpenny was one of my people. Dr. Bregan was one of my people. Jenkins out of Wisconsin. Dr. Jenkins was there. We had a bunch of great people contributing to this, right? Experts, brilliant people who were, but they were all really censored at the time. So this was a profound thing. But at the same time, this is what I call this ethical lawfare, right? We wanted changes in the law. We knew what was happening should have been illegal, was wrong, a lot of different things. So we filed the lawsuit. The lawsuit starts getting huge publicity because the truth is out, and it's the first source of truth on COVID that there was, right? And a lot of what doctors and scientists since started researching, and a lot of the big names that are there now, this was the foundation, right? This is where it all started. What happened is the case made so many waves, and we started putting it out there, especially in Ohio where I live. This created tremendous political pressure. And so our Ohio legislature at the same time puts a bill out there to limit the governor's emergency powers. Our governor was the first Republican governor in the country to push the lockdowns and to push what was happening. So we then, as a state, we have a very red state, but we had this Republican governor who was sold out. So our state legislature starts pushing this new initiative to limit the Republican governor's power to do this. As the case continued winding through, our state then passes this law, right? And the governor vetoes it. But we had created so much political pressure in the state that our Republican state house actually overrode our Republican governor's veto, and the law became law. So what this did is this effectively ended the emergency in Ohio. It effectively ended the lockdowns and all this nonsense in Ohio. And it was actually the best case solution for Ohio because what happened is that we don't have to worry about the same thing happening again in Ohio. So for reasons, between the clients and I that we decided to withdraw that case. Now, at the same time, I had started training because this case had such a profound impact all over the country. I started training and working with and dealing with a bunch of other activist lawyers. Now, helping them with other similar cases, other different things. And so it started spreading around the country. Now, day one, when I filed this case, I looked all over. I could not find a single lawyer on the planet willing to back me. I ended up finding two guys from Ohio who one of them ended up dropping off the case, but another one, my good friend Bob Gargas, still to this day a good friend to me. He and I stood together on this, and we fought this all the way through. It was the only lawyer I could find in the state with the courage to actually stand with me on it. Great friend to this day. I'm honored to call him a friend. From there, we started getting other people. Anna Garner was another attorney from New Mexico. She calls me up one day. She says, "I'm fighting this. Will you help me?" And she's going one way or another. And Anna is a warrior. So So I ended up working with her, and from there we had other attorneys that contacted us, and we started working with them. Ron Jenkins, Mike Hamilton, Larry Beecraft, Joey Gilbert, Jonathan Deemer, whole bunch of guys, that end up coming on. And these guys were all the original warriors fighting COVID around the country. And these are great people. To this day, I've got so much respect for them. And they, I shared with them what I knew, and they taught me a lot as well. Great, great attorneys. So this starts fighting all over the place, and it starts spreading. And the truth started spreading. And outside of Sherry Tenpenny, Pam Popper, and a handful of others, there weren't many people in the health profession. Sherry was the first doctor to really be on it, in my opinion. And then there were a bunch of naturopaths, people like that were on it. But
Ben
Pam
Tapper.
Popper Ben Tapper was there, a bunch of people. But Pam and Sherry were my first two big backers, and God bless them for it. We couldn't have done this without them. And they helped us kind of get some of this started. And then from there, though, as we started filing and doing this in such a credible way, it started spreading. And so over time, then others would join in. And then we launched another case on the PCR testing, which was also garbage. PCR was just used to try and scare people. They tried to convince people that the world's ending because everybody's got COVID. And there was a real dramatic shift. After I filed the first case, they quit talking about case fatality rate because we caught them on that. And then they started talking about how everybody's got it. I don't know if you remember, but there was a really dramatic shift, and it was all at once. Once we caught them and showed that they were lying, because what they had done is they put out a memo in the U.S. that changed the way deaths are determined. Death by a disease, by anything, in the United States had been determined by the coroner's handbook, which had not been changed since 2003. When COVID comes along, they issue the HHS issues a change to the coroner's handbook that says basically anybody that coughs while they're dying might be a COVID case, and you got to call it COVID, right? So they change it to increase the numbers, which was an outright lie. It was nonsense, and I've got that memo. I mean, this is like I literally, it's a piece of paper from the federal government. You can see it. And they actually said anyone that might have anything that looks like COVID, that you don't call a COVID death, we're going to come and investigate you. So that's why everybody just called everything COVID death.
And I think we should remember the COVID, the symptoms were, a sniffle, a cough, a runny nose, a temperature. It was, it's freaking, sounds like the cold to me, sounds like the flu to me. Anything could have been COVID. Literally.
Well, there was no flu. There was no flu that year. The U.S. recategorized every flu death as a COVID death. They did everything they could to increase it. I mean, the flu completely disappeared from the planet for a full year for no apparent reason, right? Which was nonsense. Yeah. It took the year off. We've had the flu every year forever, except that year, where every death was a COVID death instead of a flu death. And it was just an outright lie. It was just part of the fear tactics. And they intentionally miscategorized these deaths. This was a huge thing. The PCR testing, which I learned from one of my buddies, he's a naturopath and mechanical engineer. His name was Henry Ely. Brilliant guy. He was one of the first guys to put this stuff out about the PCR testing and some of this stuff. And, so we end up launching a lawsuit on that as well. And the whole thing, everything about PCR testing was a lie. The case, all those nose swabs, all that stuff, it was a lie designed to scare people. They ran the PCR testing improperly. For anybody that remembers the cycle discussion, there were too many cycles. But basically what they did was they ran the PCR test and they put it under a microscope, and then they just kept magnifying and magnifying and magnifying until, and this isn't literal. It's a different type of test, but they kept magnifying until they found whatever they wanted to find, and then they called it COVID.
Isn't it unfortunate and a funny coincidence that Carrie Mullis, who invented the PCR, happened to die just before COVID, and the guy who was the number one critic of Fauci and how PCR shouldn't be used to diagnose anything. Isn't that funny? Yeah. Well,
and he openly said you can't use PCR to diagnose disease. It doesn't work. Which it doesn't. It's It was just a lie.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to quickly ask you something. So I've been in a hall where Jay Bhattacharya and Asim Malhotra, the guy who, I don't know what's Jay Bhattacharya's role now, but he's somewhere high up, and Asim Malhotra, the chief medical advisor for MAHA. These two, I don't have that high an opinion of. They were in a hall in London saying how, COVID response was, just good people trying to do the best thing, but they were misplaced and mistakes were being made, but they were well-intentioned. I mean, to me, I agree with you. There was lying left, right, and center. Well-intentioned people don't lie. Okay?
No.
That's BS. To me, this is a grand conspiracy reality. People conspired to lie to the population in America, in Britain, and around the world. There was a concerted lockstep effort, media, government, doctors, everybody, to act in a certain way. This was orchestrated. This was not mistakes were made. This was not, good people trying their best. Yes, that many people were well-intentioned and good, and they fell for the fear porn. But the people at the top knew what they were doing, didn't they?
100%. 100%. And we have to distinguish, right? So the guys you're talking about are fairly political. And there's a lot of guys like that. And, when they make these statements, one of the things you've got to understand is there were a lot of good doctors and nurses who were good people. And what happens is the doctors and nurses, they get a memo from their medical advisory board in the hospital system, or from the CDC or from wherever, and it summarizes
AMA,
what's going on.
The American Medical Association, the BMA, the British Medical Association, the Royal Colleges. Yep, from up high, they get the memo. Agreed.
They get the memo, and it says, here is a summary of the scientific studies. It doesn't include the studies. It includes links to the studies, but it doesn't include the actual studies. And it's just a memo. It's a summary. And it gives them their bullet points. And a lot of these doctors and nurses said, well, these are my colleagues. These are my friends. They would never lie to me. And they didn't read further than that. Exactly. They didn't look into the underlying data behind the fake studies. They didn't question the premise. And so a lot of good doctors and a lot of good nurses fell for this. A lot of them, I know because I talked to a lot of them. There's a lot of good doctors and nurses that went out and got these COVID jabs that are regretting it terribly. Some of them are dying now. And then they told their patients to get them because they believed these memos. They believed this, they believed that. Remember, COVID hits, right? And let's look at this from the doctor's perspective. You got a good doctor who actually cares about his patients. He's told that there's this disease incoming that's going to be a nightmare. And then all of a sudden one day they turn on the faucet and the fear porn goes crazy and the hospitals explode. And these doctors don't really have the time to go and research studies. They don't have time to go research the data. They just got their memos and they see their hospital exploding. Well, okay, so what do? Well, they trust the science, even though the science should not have been trusted because it wasn't science, it was fraud. And they just get to work. They don't have the time to research what's really happening. So from there, these guys are manipulated into a situation that was false from the beginning. And so they start taking action. When Gupta and these guys are talking, not Gupta, when Bhattacharya and some of these guys are talking about it, I think that's their audience, right? The problem is that those doctors and nurses weren't bad people who did bad things intentionally. They just got lied to and manipulated. And a lot of them now have a lot of regret. I mean, can you imagine as a doctor how you'd feel if you got suckered into giving those injections to all sorts of kids and people, and now all your patients are dying, and you know it's your fault because you didn't bother doing the homework? I mean, that's a horrible, horrible thing. And if you were manipulated into that, I mean, yeah, listen, I understand you feel bad, and you should. But I think that's who they're talking about. The problem is when they make statements like that, and they don't bother to distinguish between the doctors and the nurses who were lied to and manipulated, and the doctors and nurses who were doing the lying and the manipulation, there's an issue. Fauci, the government, the people at the top 100% knew. And if you were putting out the memo that says these are safe and effective, if you were putting out the memo saying COVID's the end of the world, then you're the guy who had the responsibility to know the difference. Those people need to be tried. They need to be in jail. They need to be prosecuted, because those people, the people that were behind this, 100% not only knew, but had a responsibility to know. They influenced thousands, tens of thousands of doctors and nurses on a planetary scale. They lied and manipulated and just did everything wrong that they could do. Deborah Birx in the United States literally said in her book that her job was to lie to Donald Trump every day. She literally said that. Now, no one's investigating Deborah Birx. Nobody's bothering to look into this. There's no criminal investigation going on in the U.S. that we're aware of. Of course, Pam Bondi, our AG, worked for Pfizer right up until the time she got the job of AG. Susie Wiles worked with Big Pharma at Ballard and Associates and also Mercury LLC. I mean, the people at the top. Now, Trump, he was getting lied to. We've got Birx literally said it. So
we'll come to Pam Bondi and Susie Wiles and Trump in a second. So when I heard Jay and Asim, they weren't really talking about your average doctor. They were kind of alluding to the people at the top were making mistakes.
That's inexcusable then.
Well, that's what I said. I got up and grabbed the mic and said, well, this is the grandest, if this is incompetence, as you allude to, this is the grandest competence of incompetence I've ever seen in my life. You know, this is ridiculous. I don't believe in any of that. So, you know, I agree with you about what you said about the doctors. It's just like parents to face up to the fact that they've poisoned their children with injections and caused them to have autoimmune conditions and asthma and peanut allergies and autism and ADHD because of the toxins and poisons they've injected into them. It's easier to just keep accepting the lie that these are great for our children than to accept the cold, harsh reality that you've poisoned your children. And as a parent, your one job is to protect your children, and you've failed miserably at that. Because to face up to the truth can mentally crush people. So,
Doc, let me own this. Let me interrupt you because I want to own this. 2019, I was pro-vax. My children were vaccinated. I now know what I did to my children. So when I say this as a parent who did this. Now, my kids are not autistic. They don't have major allergies. It was a matter of luck. Okay? What I did to my children was wrong. I didn't know. I believed it. I did it with the best of intention. I tried to help my kids. I tried to keep them safe. My children were vaccinated. After 2020, when I found out what was going on, not a single other jab will ever touch their arm. But up until 2020, I didn't know. And so my children were exposed to these things. So when I talk to moms and dads out there, I want you to understand, I'm not a historic anti-vaxxer. I was as pro-vax as you can be up until 2020. And so I want to tell you, all the guilt, all the pain, listen, it's real. We were lied to. We were bamboozled. We were defrauded. This stuff was never safe. I've looked since, right? I've done my homework. There were no gold standard studies on any vaccines. None of the vaccines were properly studied. The links between vaccines and autism were based on false studies where they drew false conclusions. Everything about the vaccine industry, the science around it, is fraudulent. Everything. I will go to court. I will fight that anywhere you want to fight it, and I'll debate anybody that wants to debate on it. There is no valid science backing the vaccine industry. The stuff that's out there is crap based on more crap. And from beginning to end, I mean, going back to even polio, even the polio vaccine, the studies related to that were garbage. MMR, a nightmare. All of these vaccines that are out there, it was all based on garbage. And, you know, I do think parents like me, you know, I don't know what the long-term impact on my children are. My children were vaccinated with these poisons that they should never have had put in their body. There was no good justification, no science. I believed it. I was lied to. So I want everybody to understand something. When I say, yeah, you shouldn't have did that, Neither should I. Neither should I.
You and me both. We're very similar age. I think you're a couple of years younger than me. But, I'm sure you've got young kids. I've got young kids, 10, 8, and 6.
15 now.
Yeah, mine's are 10, 8, and 6. Up until 2020, my kids have been vaccinated too. I'm actually slightly in a worse off position because since about 2011, 12, I was getting a little bit skeptical about vaccines. I don't really understand this constant push to have the flu vax every year, and I was just getting a bit and I even said to my wife, do the kids really need all these vaccines? I'd see them come home crying, hysterical, they didn't want it, and I'd be like, why do they need this? I don't. And my wife would turn around and say, well, you're not an anti-vaxxer, are you? And this is where I'm worse, because instead of saying, well, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I just want to look into this and I should have investigated further, I just went, oh, okay, no, of course not, and just stayed quiet. That all changed. And, now in 2020, I started like, our kids are not getting this vaccine. And then I looked into it. And then when I looked into it, I was like, oh my God, they're all bad. They're using the word vaccine as cover. This is gene editing technology. And they're using vaccines because vaccine is now holy cow that you can't question. And frankly, it's science to question everything. So why have they ring fenced this topic of vaccines is something you cannot question? And if you dare to question it, not only will you get into trouble, you'll be destroyed. It's like the scientific medical version of anti-Semitism. Like, you just can't go there. Don't do it. So, I'm not a born anti-vaxxer. I had the vaccines as a medical student, as a doctor. My kids had it. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm a bloody anti-vaxxer now, and I'm not ashamed to say it. But what you were saying about the doctors, what you say about the doctors, look, I would say, yes, you put your trust in the government and your colleagues, and you thought, no, they wouldn't do that because you're a good person. And I inherently believe that most people are good people. And their good nature was sabotaged and hijacked by the evil ones because they are incapable of thinking these evil thoughts. And they thought, right, well, we'll trust in them. Well, of course, they're. Why would they lie? Why would they do this? They wouldn't do this. I'm incapable of thinking of anything such an evil thing. So these people were abused and manipulated and coerced. But the problem is when the information is there in front of you, and you can see people getting sick, and you can see your patients having problems, and then you refuse to accept or acknowledge, and you turn a blind eye because of ego. Because of arrogance, because of hubris. Now I am not happy. And do you know the number of doctors I've had conversations with? I mean, that's one of the reasons why I went public and my Twitter post went viral. I said, look, I'm talking to so many doctors and they're all saying something strange is happening. Their clinics are rammed with things that you would just read in medical textbooks. These weird and wonderful neurological conditions, turbo cancers, cardiological problems in young kids and young people. Like, we've never seen anything like this. And they're all saying in hushed, quiet tones and quiet corridors and closed rooms, it's the vax. And when I say to them, oh, we need to speak up and say something, they'll go, oh, no, can't say anything. No, that is unforgivable. That is wrong. That's cowardice. That's evil. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. And I'm afraid most doctors are doing that. And I've even had doctors say to me, oh, we agree with everything you're doing. We applaud you. We love what you're doing. But we can't do that because we've got a young family and a mortgage and can't sacrifice everything. And I'm like, what? And I'm in a position to sacrifice everything? What makes me any different? I have a mortgage. I have young kids. What's your excuse? And they have no answer. So look, we've got now a psychopathic society where we're led by these evil psychopathic rulers, but much of society is now also corrupt. Good people now are doing the bidding of the evil people, thinking that they're doing good, when in fact they're doing a lot of evil. I mean, much of this prison that we've created, the digital prison that we've created, we've engineered it and been the designers and the builders of it. And we march into this prison while thanking our prison guard. Humankind needs to lift their game. Otherwise we're in a whole heap of trouble, mate.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, listen, we're to this day, I mean, in the U.S., with Bobby as secretary, we just approved the next generation of the Moderna next spike vaccine, another mRNA poison that's unnecessary. It's not safe. It's not effective. And we approved it based on what's called the non-inferiority standard. Now, this is one of the most insidious things our FDA has ever done. Bobby knows or should know it. But I think Bobby's been told that you can't touch mRNA. I don't think he's allowed to touch mRNA. We have the saRNA being fast-tracked with Arcturus, which will be an STD. The saRNA is self-amplifying RNA. It's mRNA on steroids. And once you get that, I think it'll be contagious. I think there's a very high likelihood, and I did a white paper on it. I had some smart doctors and people double-check my work, but we did a white paper on it. You're going to have this persistent mRNA tech in your blood that self-amplifies. It's going to stay there forever, which increases the likelihood of it becoming contagious. I think it's going to act as an STD. There'll be no informed consent. It'll spread throughout the world. These things are going on and being approved under Donald Trump and Bobby Kennedy, administration. Now, here's the thing. We know at this point that these things aren't safe or effective, but yet they're using this non-inferiority standard. Now, this is a trick by the FDA, right? So the FDA says, well, listen, the flu vaccine has been thoroughly tested. It's been out for years. And so all you need to show for approval when you change the vaccine is that it's not inferior to the previous version. Well, here's the problem, right? They're now applying this to mRNA tech. Well, if it's allowed to be applied to mRNA tech, there's a real issue because mRNA was never studied. There were never long-term studies. There were never any real studies. The studies based for mRNA were all fraud. They were all garbage, and they showed that they weren't safe or efficacious. It was only approved under emergency standards because it was garbage. Yet they're using the same non-inferiority standard. They say, well, this isn't worse than the previous version of mRNA. Well, the previous version of mRNA is causing autoimmune issues, cancer, blood clots, myocarditis. I mean, the list goes on, which, by the way, that list was published, they knew in 2020 because I have the VerbPack presentation that shows in 2020 prior to authorization of these mRNA vaccines that they knew this was going to happen. I also have the 2006 FDA document that acknowledges that cancer is a likely delayed adverse event for these mRNA gene therapy drugs, right? So they knew about the turbo cancers. They knew about the myocarditis. They knew about the blood clots. They knew about all these things. They approved it anyways. And now they're saying, well, these new versions aren't inferior to the old version, so they're okay. So we're okay putting a product on the market that causes cancer, blood clots, myocarditis, death, infertility, all these different things that we now can show using peer-reviewed studies. Remember the gold standard science. No one can question the science. We can show now that these things aren't safe or effective, yet because they're not inferior to the old unsafe, ineffective drugs, the FDA is using a loophole in the law to approve them. Where is Bobby on this? I love Bobby. I've got respect for Bobby, and I know he's doing everything he can. But, someone on high told him he's not allowed to do anything on this. That's my belief, because Kennedy knows this stuff better than anybody. And for him to continue to allow this is not just disheartening, it's disgusting. It's disgusting because what's happening is we're still every day that mRNA is on the shelf, it's in the market. We have new children being injected with it. And those new children are going to be subject to lifelong health issues. They're going to be subject to infertility. They may never have babies. We don't know what all is going to happen, but we know that a very, very substantial number of them are going to have serious issues over time with this. Yet we continue to do it. And then you've got people like Mary Tyler Bowden and Peter McCullough who are honestly looking at the science, who are speaking out about this. And people are telling them, well, you should back off. We're doing the best we can. The best we can is not good enough. When children are continuing to die and you know that it's based on fraud, it's not good enough. I don't care if it's one child's life. Ask yourself, if it's your child, would you want someone to shut up and say it's okay? The fraud continues. And until such time as someone has the courage to actually stand up and do the right thing, it will continue. And we really need someone, when we talk about our leaders at HHS now, they need to find the courage to speak up regardless of what it costs them, because if we don't, this just continues.
You know what, Tom? Amen. I love you, brother. Everything you've just said. And it's funny. It's interesting. In the last 4 weeks, I've spoken to Suzanne Humphreys, the author of Dissolving Illusions, Sherry Tenpenny, and Henry Ely. Suzanne's been on the podcast, and the other two are going to come on my podcast. And as far as I'm concerned, they're the greatest of all time. They're the original OGs. These guys were calling it right from the day dot. They're proper anti-vaxxers. They're not grifters. It's cost them so much in terms of their everything. And I love all of them. And you're in that camp because you're a fearless warrior. And I know what you said about, you love Bobby and everything. I'm sure you find this as well. Look, you are dependent now on your subscribers and your supporters. And they, like me, tend to be mainly Trump, MAGA, and Bobby fans. And the problem is, I find that when I criticize Trump and Bobby, because I don't think they're doing things the way I want them to do, and because they're flipping what they said they were going to do, and they're now in positions of power. We were waiting for them to get into power. Biden, big bad Biden, was the evil one. Now we're going to get our guys in. And now they're in, and there's just no movement. There's not enough movement. It's just the first day in office, he's talking about $500 billion Stargate and Larry Ellison, cancer, mRNA. What the holy frack was that all about? And then you got the next spike that's come through. You've got the RSV vaccine that's come through. Not good enough. Not good enough. And I've played this through in my head. I'm Bobby Kennedy. I'm HHS secretary. And I get a guy come to my office and puts a gun to my head and goes, you know what, I'm gonna shoot you, or even better, I'm gonna shoot all your kids. Your kids are gonna be in an accident. Unless you do what we tell you, this is what's gonna happen. I've played it out. You know what? I'm God-fearing. I am not scared of death. I know that I'm an eternal being and I will return to God and I will be asked and judged on my actions. So I would go straight away on public TV. I mean, this is social media, X, you're doing live. And I would say, by the way, I've just had a visit from the deep state and they've threatened me and my family if I don't play along. But guess what? I'm going to tell you the truth. And if I die or my kids die tomorrow, this is why. But you all need to know this. That's what I would do. That's what I would do. What have they got on him? And why does he not have the kahunas now to speak up and do what needs to be done? I mean, if he truly wrote that book, the real Anthony Fauci, if he really knows the system and why is he appointing the means as the chief surgeon general, like the person who didn't even finish their residency, who's pushing wearables? Why is he pushing wearables? Why is he pushing red dye? You have a choice whether you eat food with red dye or not. But still, in the US, there are so many mandates insisting children get vaccinated just to go to school or whatever, or childcare. This is not good enough. And he has it within his power as the HHS secretary to stop things overnight. My Substack's coming out about this later on today. Basically, the Public Health Emergency Declaration under the PrEP Act gives a blanket liability immunity to the pharmaceutical companies, the vaccine manufacturers, the distributors, the people who dispose and dispense it, the whole shabam. They get a get out of jail card free. It's his remit whether to declare that emergency or not. Yesterday, he could say there is no longer any public health emergency under the PrEP Act. All immunity ends today. And then you just sit back. There's no mention of COVID or vaccines or anything. And then when the lawsuits start coming in and the big pharma companies have to defend themselves and pay out, suddenly everything goes away. Everything goes away. Yep. It's in his power. People say to me, oh, but you know what? It's an act of Congress to repeal this act or that law. Yeah, I get all that. But as the HHS secretary, he can simply say there's no longer any health emergency. Why has he not done that?
Well, he could do even more than that, because here's the thing. Even under the PrEP Act, fraud is not there's no immunity for fraud. it's quite clear that there was not just fraud, but massive, wide-scale fraud with relation to this, right? All he's got to do is release some data. But here's the thing. So I love Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump. Here's the thing, though. Donald Trump has said, listen, I got a lot of people that tell me they love the vaccine, a lot of people that tell me they hate it. It is what it is. So I'm going to make it your choice. And I appreciate Donald Trump's mission ensuring that it's a choice, not forced. The problem is, though, is we don't put hand grenades on the market for children, right? We don't put dangerous products on the market and let kids play with it, right? We don't do things like this. Now, I expect what's going to happen. Mark my words on this. This is a prediction, Doc. This fall, Bobby's going to have this profound report coming out on vaccines. And I think it's going to be huge. And I think a lot of the traditional vaccines are going to they're going to go the way of the dodo, right? Because of this report. What's going to happen then is they're going to all be replaced with the new mRNA, bug-based, all these new types of vaccines, right? They're going to step in and do that because we aren't going to get rid of our vaccines. They're going to redefine the word vaccine to include a lot of things that should never be called a vaccine because they're not. And they're going to use legal trickery to get it done. Now, here's the thing. Bobby knows better and knows this stuff. I don't know what he's doing to stop that or to prevent that. But you know, President Trump, for example, there were, and I know this, there was set a group of doctors and very, very respected, brilliant people were supposed to go brief him on the mRNA and the COVID stuff. That trip, that whole project was canceled, right? Why was it canceled? Well, guess who you got to go through if you want to get a meeting with Donald Trump? Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles is the gatekeeper, his chief of staff, right? She's always been his gatekeeper. You don't get a meeting with Trump unless you go through Wiles. Well, who's Susie Wiles? Well, she worked as a partner at Ballard and a partner at Mercury LLC, and she still is listed as a managing partner at Mercury LLC. Well, who do they represent? Gavi, all sorts of vaccine people. I mean, whether they're still representing them or not, these are companies that have worked and represented every vaccine, nonsense out there. They're tied in with it. Now, I'm not saying that I can't prove to you that Susie's, bought and paid for, but there's a lot of questions to be asked, right? There's a lot of questions to be asked. Same thing with, Bondi. She's working at Pfizer. When you've got people around you that are ensuring you're not hearing the full story, what happens? And, at some point, we've got to ask ourselves, because you got, like you mentioned, Larry Ellison. So they're planning on curing cancer with mRNA. Well, let's talk about what they're planning on doing, right? So the plan is that they're going to test your blood, and they're going to and they're going to have AI analyze any free-floating cancer cells in your blood. Then within 48 hours, they're going to synthesize a specific mRNA vaccine for you. Now let's think about that. First of all, if there are cancer cells already in your blood, is it actually a vaccine? A vaccine is to prevent a disease, right? Well, if you've already got cancer, it can't prevent it. It's a treatment. So it's not a vaccine anyways, right? But they want to call it a vaccine because they want the immunity that comes with a vaccine, right? They want the legal immunity from lawsuit. Because why? Well, in 48 hours, can you properly test a vaccine? No, you can't test it. It's individual. It's a personalized vaccine. How are you going to test it for safety or efficacy? The answer is you're not. They don't want to have to test it. They don't want you to know what you're putting in your body. They just want you to continue to put in your body whatever it is that they tell you so that they can control your health forever. This whole thing is the most ill-conceived, corrupt notion I've ever heard. Now, it's going to be a really easy sell because everybody on the planet's getting turbo cancer right now because of the mRNA vaccines, right? Now, remember, again, go back. We've got the 2006 industry guidance from the FDA that openly talks about mRNA gene therapy type drugs as a cause or a potential cause for delayed onset cancer. What's happening? Well, we're 3 to 5 years out and we're seeing cancer explode. Well, we knew this would happen. The FDA knew it was happening. And now, guess what? The same guys who did this, created this poison that they knew was going to cause cancer, well, they suddenly have a cure. It is the ultimate snake oil scam. And because the president's got gatekeepers who are keeping away people who could actually brief him on this, he doesn't hear it. He only hears whatever he's, allowed to hear. And
Okay.
I can back that up further, Doc. I can back that up further. So you say, well, no, the president knows. The president knows. Oh, does he? Well, why is it that the president didn't know that Ukraine tried to assassinate Putin, or that Ukraine the military strike against the Russian nuclear arsenal? President Trump actually said, when he was asked by reporters about this, that, well, I don't know anything about that yet. His advisors aren't telling him everything. They're lying to him. They're omitting information. That could have caused World War III. So do you think that they're telling him everything about the vaccines? Of course not. He is the busiest man on the planet. Donald Trump has the biggest job on the planet. He's doing an incredible job. He's doing a wonderful job, but he can't know everything about everything. And if he's got crooked advisors who are keeping him from hearing the truth on certain issues, he's not going to know the truth on certain issues. We know from the first term that Deborah Birx and others, their job was, air quotes, to lie to the president. Do we really think that that's changed? There are still too many things on the president's desk for him to be a master of every single issue. And I would argue that in this particular issue, he is being misled and lied to still. And I would argue that, Bobby has limited access to educate him on this, and was probably told, listen, if you go too hard after mRNA, your job's gone. If you're in Bobby Kennedy's seat then, and I'm guessing here, I can't prove this, but if you're in Bobby Kennedy's seat and they say, well, listen, you can do whatever you want, but you got to stay away from mRNA. So Bobby's got the opportunity to help us by cleaning the food supply, by, getting rid of a lot of poisons, doing a lot of things that will have a massive impact. And if Bobby's gone, who's going to do that, right? So if you're in Kennedy's seat, I don't think it's as simple as looking at this just through the lens of mRNA. Because Bobby is doing a lot of good right now. And I'm going to back him, and I'm going to defend him on one thing. I'm going to say, listen, Bobby's doing an immense amount of good, and I think he's going to get a lot of these vaccines pulled off the market. He just pulled mercury out of the vaccines, which is a huge deal, right? The problem is that the long game is to move this to gene therapy drugs so that they can control our genomes. We know that, listen, the SV40 that they found in the Pfizer vaccines was damning. But the thing that nobody's talking about is the other study that came out recently that showed that not only was SV40 in the vaccines, but SV40 promoters. Now, the SV40, you could argue, was there through bad manufacturing. The promoters couldn't be there unless they were put there. That had to be intentional. They knew this was going to cause cancer to explode, I believe, and I believe that they did it intentionally so that they could justify their mRNA cancer cures. I think that they knew. I think that you're going to see over the next year or two cancer rates to continue to explode and skyrocket globally. I think it was intentional. And I think that what's going to happen is that needed to happen. Remember, they had to have COVID to create an emergency where you needed the mRNA. They're going to need a cancer emergency to create a solution for cancer, right? If cancer explodes.
This is the definition of a racket. So you have the medical mafia going around beating up all the shopkeepers, and then they say, for your protection, you need to give us some money, and we'll make sure this doesn't happen. They've created the cancer, now they're selling the cure. That's a racket. That's the definition. But listen, back to Trump, right? And your Bobby. Hey, my lovely listeners. Just a quick shout out. As many of you know, I now offer a one-to-one online consultation service. And no, it's not just for people contemplating surgery, it's for any of you. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're struggling in life, maybe you're going through a painful divorce or facing a major health decision, or if it's the fact that you've just left a rushed doctor's appointment with a head full of unanswered questions, book in with me. I can help you make sense of your diagnosis, explain mainstream treatment options in plain English, and also walk you through alternative and integrative approaches. If surgery is on the table, I can guide you through preparation, how to reduce post-op risks and complications, and what questions to ask your surgeon before going ahead. So maybe you're just looking for a second opinion. or you want to figure out whether to see a GP, a homeopath, an osteopath, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, or even which supplements or lifestyle tweaks to make. Well, I think I can help you, buddy. Tap into the knowledge I've gained from 25 years as a mainstream doctor, and the last 2 years interviewing over 400 experts from all walks of life. And don't just take my word for it. Here are just a couple of real reviews left by real people who have worked with me. Jessica. Having a consultation with Doc Malik has made me feel empowered to take control of my health condition and proceed in a manner that is in line with my beliefs. He helped me make sense of my condition, gave me a clearer picture of the medication I've been prescribed, and provided direction on a number of lifestyle and diet changes I can make. Highly recommend. And then there's Diana Austin from yesterday. These days, it's hard to know who is real and who is genuine. So many are imposters with no other agenda than draining your wallet. Doc Malik is the real deal. He is knowledgeable and caring and suggested actionable strategies for me to pursue. I'd give him 6 stars if I could. Thanks, Diana. So there you go. If something inside of you is nudging you to book a session with me, trust your gut instinct. I always tell everyone I meet, trust your gut instinct. It never lies to you. You lie to yourself. So you can read more of the reviews at docmalik.setmore.com, and you can make a booking there as well. So that's docmalik, DOCMALIK, .setmore, SETMORE.com, COM. So there's 2 dots there. docmalik.setmore.com. Folks, love you loads. Let's get back to the show. Bye. Now, part of me is wondering, are you just blindsided with loyalty? Like, they've said good things in the past and you're hoping for them to be these good people. Is it, you're worried about offending your base? Because if you go hard on them, they're going to do what they did to me, unsubscribe. Oh, I'm tired of you having a go at Bobby. I'm unsubscribing. I'm like, okay, well, goodbye then. So we have to be careful what we say. I hope that's not the case for you. I think you're fearless and you just say it as it is. But there's always a concern that. No, but I'll come to that in a second. But then what I want to say about Trump is that I was a Trumper first time round. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I really wanted him to be. But then the excuses all started coming in. Oh, he surrounded himself with the wrong people. Oh, it's not his fault. He's inexperienced. He's not a politician. Oh, he's well-intentioned, but he's been given bad advice. He's super smart. He's playing 7D chess, but he got it wrong. There's always excuses for this guy, right? He can never do anything wrong. He's super smart, but then he makes mistakes. He's got bad advisors. He's surrounded himself with the wrong people. Which one is it? Is he super smart or is he getting things wrong all the time? Which is it? And so I think there's 3 options. He's either a good guy and he is just not very smart, not very clever, and he's driven by ego and he's surrounded himself by stupid people and he's not questioning enough because, frankly, he's not acting like a smart guy. The mistakes are too many. To still be saying that he's proud of being the father of the warp speed and the vaccine is not a good take. He gets literally booed on stage and he thinks this is all right. No. I mean, he's either dumb or he knows something, or he is not the good guy and they have got stuff on him and they also hide things from him and he is a managed president, or finally, he is fully in on the act and everything is just a game. He's an actor. He's playing his part. He's playing the good guy. He says some nice things, but fundamentally, nothing changes. The boat is still sailing in the same direction. So you get the tacking left, tacking right, tacking left Kamala Biden, right Trump. But the final destination is still the same. Technocracy, digital gulag, mRNA tech, authoritarianism, digital currencies. Nothing's changing. We're still heading down that direction. So what is it? Because this guy Trump, I'm sorry, this idea, he's always surrounding himself with the wrong people. I mean, this is his second term now. For God's sake, did he not learn any lessons first time round? Like, surround yourself with the right people, for God's sake. You're not dumb. You keep telling us how great you are and how smart you are, and the guy who knows how to do the deals. The guy in The Apprentice who's firing all the people when they were not good enough. Well, are you the same guy? Because you act differently. I'm sorry.
Well, let me tell you how I think of this, right? And I got to thread a needle here. But what if there's another option? right? So I hear what you're saying, and I've been through this analysis a bunch of times. So I'm an evidence guy, and I've really been disciplined about sticking to the evidence I have. I also stick to the concept that you're innocent until proven guilty.
Yep.
Especially if you have a long track record of being a decent guy on certain things. Now, let's talk about where this is. Bobby has a huge, huge history of being on the right side of this issue.
Keep talking.
Trump has done a great job on many, many, many things. Trump is, his foreign policy, I love what he's doing. He's done a great job on the economy, a lot of things like that. There are a lot of things that I think Donald Trump has done very, very well. Now, you can be great and brilliant at 100 things, and it doesn't mean you're great and brilliant at 101. One of the areas, for all the praise that I can give Donald Trump on foreign policy, trade, business, these sorts of things, he has been an abject failure on the health side, except one thing. He has stayed true to making sure that there's choice. Choice is a huge deal for me, that he's always stayed true to making sure that it's not the mandates weren't there. Now, here's the problem, though. Operation Warp Speed was an epic failure on profound levels. He should know that by now. But because I support someone who's good on 99 out of 100 issues, doesn't mean that I think he's got to be perfect on all 100, right? In this issue, though, we have a very profound issue, and it happens to be an issue that's a major focus for me. So I can support Donald Trump across the board and recognize that on this issue, it's been disastrous. And it has. I don't think that Trump is necessarily a bad guy, and I don't think he's an idiot. I think that in this area, it's certainly out of his realm of expertise. And the reason I think of that is so I think of myself as an attorney and who I am and who I was. In 2019, I was pro-vax. It's only because I spent 5 years in this space that I know what I know. I mean, someone had to show me. Now, here's the problem. No one has been able to sit and go through the real evidence with Donald Trump. I mean, he's been exposed to a lot of it, but has he seen it all? Has it been properly presented? I don't know. Until I can show that he's been shown and he's chosen to do the wrong thing, I can't show it. So innocent till proven guilty. Right? Now, maybe you're saying that's rosy. You're looking through the rosy-colored glasses. I have no problem telling you. Warp Speed was an epic failure. Everything that he's done on the mRNA thing is a disaster. He appointed Bobby Kennedy, though. Bobby Kennedy, we know where Bobby stood historically. Now, the thing that's really bizarre here, when I analyze this, is how do you get to a point that Bobby Kennedy isn't stopping the mRNA and won't talk about it properly?
Right.
Now, that's the issue. Now, to me, what that indicates when I analyze this is the people around, the people up there, Trump appoints Kennedy. You know where Kennedy is. Somewhere, someone's, got Bobby's hands tied on something. Because Kennedy's been, he was with me. He was with all of us fighting the mRNA. So he knows what's going on here. Now, there were reports that when Kennedy came in as Secretary of HHS, he asked for data from specific databases on COVID vaccine injuries. Now, that data was tracked. I've got the databases. I can show you what databases they said they were going to use to track this. I've got all sorts of stuff on this. The Secretary of HHS was told, no, you can't have that data. Now, wait a second. How is that legal? What's going on here, right? So this tells me that there is a large apparatus that's in the middle that's causing problems. There's certain things about this that we, the public, don't know. At the end of the day, I have two options. I can attack and go after Bobby, and I can attack and go after Trump endlessly, or give them the benefit of the doubt. Historically, their record has been on the good side of things. In this case, it sticks out like a sore thumb that they're not. But we do know that there's some deep state nonsense going on, right? So the question is, are they still, am I better off until I can prove and until I can show that they're actually, if I could prove to you that they were nefarious, I'd go after them because I've got no fear, right? I don't care. The problem is I can't prove that. There's issues, and it certainly sticks out like a sore thumb, but he appoints Bobby Kennedy. He appoints people who are going to, they say, we're going to get to real science. Okay, so let's see it. Let's see the real science. Now, you see, the kind of shift with ACIP. Now, I don't love everybody he put on the new ACIP committee, right? I mean, some of the people are just, they're political. But we see major shifts happening. Where's this going to go is the question. I'm still at a point where I'm willing to give the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to fight, and it doesn't mean I'm okay with what they're doing, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to give them a pass in this issue. What I am going to do, though, is say, listen, across the board, and historically these guys have been good guys, I'm not willing to say that what's happening with mRNA is okay. It's not. It's bullcrap. Every day that this is out there, Bobby Kennedy knows damn well that another kid is going to die. Another kid is going to get this injection. Another kid's going to have.
So this is what I'm trying to say. Listen to yourself. Exactly. He knows this. Yeah. And every day goes by. And not just that, they're being rolled out. The mRNA factories are being made across the world.
Oh, I know.
Nothing's stopping. And you just think, maybe the whole point,
long term,
maybe the whole point of getting Bobby in was to give us the idea that, you know what, it's all in hand. Don't worry, we can relax now. He's going to get the job done. He ain't getting the job.
100% that's possible.
He ain't getting 100%. The job done. The problem is everyone's 100%. Relaxed. Human nature is, do you know what? Hypervigilance is tiring, exhausting. Everybody wants to relax. Someone else is doing the hard work and heavy lifting. I don't need to worry about this anymore.
I'm working on a lawsuit right now, Doc.
Yeah?
I'm working on a lawsuit right now. It's not public. We can't talk about details right now, but I'm working on a lawsuit. I'm not relaxed. I'm not standing by.
Yeah, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the public.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying that I agree with you. That's a distinct possibility. And we, the people, need to be pressuring now more than ever. Listen, why am I doing this show? Because we, the people, need to be standing up and making noise. And you're right. Everybody wants to go to sleep. Listen, we fought for 4 years of Biden. It was hell. Everybody's exhausted.
Yep.
Everybody's beat up, especially in our movement, in the health freedom movement. Now, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what side are the current leaders on? Historical evidence points to the fact that they're on our side. And when we look at the fact that there's so much bad happening, and so much, listen, look at just today. It's out that the DOJ is not doing anything with the Epstein list. They're going to let these child rapists get off. They're trying to claim Pam Bondi, who was AG in Florida while Epstein was doing what he did and did nothing, is now AG at the U.S. and is claiming that there's no client list and that he committed suicide. This is absurd, right?
Absurd.
This is absurd.
Absolutely absurd.
Do we think that there's not bad people around that are pushing for bad things? 100%. Now, I'm not saying that we should. Here's where I distinguish myself from a lot of the people who say Trump. Because Trump ain't Jesus. He's another guy, and he does make mistakes. And I disagree with what he's doing on the vaccines. That said, he's done a great job across the board. We know there's a ton of evidence indicating a huge, huge, huge deep state presence fighting back. What does the deep state care about? Yep, amen, right there. What does the deep state care about most? There are two issues that underlie everything they're doing. One is the promotion of AI. Two is the promotion of gene therapy and genetic modification, genetic manipulation. Those two things are foundation to everything the deep state's working on. Those are the holy grails that no one's allowed to touch. And what do we have? Day one of Trump's office, Larry Ellison comes up there. We're going to use AI to do gene therapy on people to fix cancer. We know that this is where they're going. This, I think, is probably the biggest and the most profound fight that Trump and Bobby have to fight. So here's the thing. We need to ask ourselves in our movement, have they proven to us that they're on the wrong side? And I would say they have not proven to us they're on the wrong side at all. And the reason I say we got to look at it that way is this. Bobby and Trump are the only two that have the capacity for real change in this? Do we want to fight with the only two people that have the capacity to make a change in this right now before we can prove that they're not on our side?
No, it's not. It's not about that. That's not the argument, Tom. The argument is, you just said, have they proven themselves? No, Trump in his first term proved to be wrong. He was the father of warp speed. He didn't do anything about Fauci. He bigged him up. And in many ways, COVID happened under his watch. Secondly, I've just told you that Bobby could overnight fix everything by ending the emergency declaration.
I don't think he could.
But it's legally, in his remit.
I don't think he could.
He's got it, and that is his job under the PrEP Act. He can declare and end the emergency period, and he hasn't. He hasn't.
I understand that, but I understand that, but Doc, let's say he declares the end.
Yeah,
there is a massive amount of law that the big pharma would use to argue that their stuff should still be on the market and it should still be protected under the Vaccine Act, and that all these different things would apply. Now, it would have a big impact if he did that, but I don't think it would shut down mRNA in any way, shape, or form. That would be a whole nother thing. I'm telling you as an attorney who's looked at this extensively. If Bobby ends every emergency, that would help. It would do a lot of good things, but it would not take this off the market. It would still be there. And there would be other mRNA that's coming out that's in the pipeline. And if Bobby tries to shut that down, he's going to have to, as a lawyer, go through A, B, and C before he could actually shut that down. We've gotten too far legally. He wouldn't be able to pull this off the market, even if he declared an end of the emergency tomorrow. Instead, what you would have is you'd have this legal mess that may or may not work. Listen, we've seen some real questionable things come out of the courts.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. The PrEP Act, it basically gives sweeping legal immunity to the pharmaceutical companies, to healthcare providers, and government entities during a public health emergency. And the PrEP Act authorizes the Secretary of Health and Human Services, HHS, currently Bobby Kennedy. It authorizes him to issue a declaration that provides that legal liability protection to the vaccine manufacturers, to the drug and device makers, to the government agencies, to the medical personnel, to the distributors and the planners, as long as they're responding to a declared public health emergency. And the declaration is awful because it covers death, injury, side effects, malfunctioning products, even if negligence is involved and proven, as long as they're following federal guidelines. Now, Bobby Kennedy, in his position as the secretary, can say, you know what? I declare that there's no longer a public health emergency. Boom. Yep. There goes the legal liability protection. There goes all the lawyers like you open the floodgates and start suing these people. And that's it. Game over. Why is it not the case?
I wish, Doc. I wish. Here's the problem. Had that happened 3 or 4 years ago, yes. Now, what's happened is these vaccines have been legally approved. So these are no longer just under EUA. Some of these mRNA vaccines are legally approved, and they're using the legally approved vaccines to justify other mRNA vaccines being legally approved. They are subject to immunity through the Vaccine Act. At best, what that would do is move us to vaccine court, right? It's not going to pull it off the market. It's not going to shut down the pipeline.
Tell me one thing. Will it make a huge impact in any way?
It would have a substantial impact, but not the impact that everybody would like it to have.
But it'd be a lot more than right now what's happening. And then surely Bobby can then say, I'm no longer declaring there's any emergency. So liability immunity goes out the window. Secondly, I'm going to lobby Congress and the president to push a bill to cancel the PrEP Act and the 1986 vaccine immunity liability protection. Because
agreed, if he could do that. But I think Bobby's been told that if you even think about that, we're going to impeach you. I don't think he can do that. I think he knows that that's an impossibility.
Well, then he should call their bluff and say, everybody, this is what I want, and I've been threatened with impeachment. This is the way the system is working and the deep state and its tentacles are hampering
That's what I would do, and that's what you would do.
Yeah. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Because I would rather lose everything. Everything. I've already lost as much as a guy can lose in this fight. I would lose everything to save one child, and that I believe is the right thing to do. But I'm going to tell you, I do understand that I would be falling on a sword for no benefit. I would fall on that sword for no benefit because that's the guy I am. But there would be no benefit to it. I don't think Bobby is going to be able to stop this. If he falls on that sword, what we're going to get is we're going to get a new HHS secretary who's much worse. I don't agree with this personally. I would fall on the sword. But here's what's going to happen practically. And I'm just going to tell you this. If he does this legally, because of the way things are situated right now, mRNA will not come off the market. We've watched in this country. We watch Cassidy. We watch Tom Tillis. We've watched these guys blatantly oppose obvious things that everyone in the country supports. We've watched how owned our Congress is, how corrupt our Congress is. We've watched how so many people in our federal legislature are outright corrupt, outright, openly and in your face corrupt. And they will not change. That's not going to change. What will happen if Bobby were to fall on that sword tomorrow, which I would do, but that's probably why I'm not HHS secretary, is it will have a big impact publicly. It will awaken a lot of people. Congress will not do anything about it. Congress will, you know what? Think about this. Think about this, Doc. I literally went to Congress. There was press there. I talked about the fact that the mRNA vaccine existed in 2015. Do you know how much play that got in the press? Zip. I put my name under a declaration under penalty of perjury. I can't get a single congressman to acknowledge that I did that. Not one. Why is that? Do you really think that one guy falling on the sword is going to change this? It's not. What we have to do is, this is up to, listen, you and I, what we're doing right now is the only answer. The only answer. Our government is broken, and unless we get millions of people around this world aware of the situation and not just arguing for, but demanding changes, standing for it, until we wake people back up, until they quit thinking, oh, Trump's got it. No, Trump will do it if we back him. Bobby will do it if we back him. But we need millions of people fighting, not just sitting there asleep, not just thinking about it as a secondary thing. You're fighting for the lives of your children. The reason I do a podcast, the reason I'm doing this, the reason I'm still doing everything I do is because I am aware. I have looked at this disgusting, repulsive snake pit of Washington, D.C. from every angle. I've talked to more whistleblowers and more people than anyone I know. I have stuck my nose into everything. I've gotten slapped in the face so many times for sticking my nose into it, I can't tell you. I've gotten calls from everybody I can think of telling me to stick my nose out of it, stay out of it, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. Listen, if there were a way to do this that I could see, if yelling at Bobby or yelling at Trump was going to do it for me, I'd be happy to do it. Here's the thing. It won't change the law. The law right now is so jacked. The only thing, the PrEP Act we can weaken that. We can do what we want there. But the Vaccine Immunity Act is still there. It ain't going anywhere. It's not even going to come close to going anywhere. Bobby falls on the sword. Here's what happens. The new HHS secretary is going to be someone who is appointed by Congress. It's going to be like Pam Bondi replacing Matt Gaetz, right? Gaetz falls off. Gaetz is going to fight. He's going to do all these things. He falls off. Instead, we get Pam Bondi, who has arrested absolutely no one of any that matters whatsoever. No one. Nothing has been done. We are going to get a new HHS secretary who's going to just toe the line, who's going to capitulate to everything. We're going to have it actually worse than what we have it now. Right now, we still can work with Bobby, and if we, the people, get our butts off the chairs and do enough, I believe we can start to turn the tide on this. But it's going to have to, listen, we've got to accept responsibility, Doc. Everybody wants to blame Trump, blame Kennedy, blame this. Well, let me ask you, the viewer here, at the risk of alienate our viewers, what did you do today to try and move the ball down the field? Have you sent a letter? Have you sent an email? Have you even shared this podcast?
Have you told people, watch Dr. Malik, watch what he's doing? Have you told people, look what Renz is doing? Have you donated to the people who are fighting for you? What have you done today? And if the answer is nothing, then quit pointing at Kennedy and start pointing at yourself, because you're the problem. And I hate to say this, but at the end of the day, these politicians are still working at the whim of public opinion. And until public opinion is so strong and so outspoken and so powerful that they can overtake the special interests, it ain't going to change. The system is broken. It's corrupt. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. It makes me sick. Yes, I would fall on the sword in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. If you knew what I've given up in my personal life for this fight, what I've lost, trust me, there ain't a whole lot more to lose. And I continue, and I will continue. But understand that if we want to create change, it is our responsibility. And it starts and ends and will always be our responsibility. The greatest lie ever told is that you have a leader, that you have a ruler. Every tyrant uses this lie. Every tyrant convinces you that they're in charge. You know who's in charge? The millions of people that they're trying to rule. You think that if little fat Kim Jong-un had an uprising of millions of people in North Korea, he would say, what? I mean, what's he going to do? If everybody rises up, there's a chance to change things. But it is always, in a free nation and in a free world, and even in an unfree world, it is the responsibility of those who are ruled to tolerate or not tolerate the ruler. Until such time as we, the people, stand up and say, hell no, Bobby can do anything he wants. He's not going to win this fight without us. Same with Trump, same with anybody else. You can take the victories that you can get and move forward, or you can just lose everything. And at the end of the day, I hate that I'm having to defend what they're doing here, because I think it's indefensible. I personally think it's indefensible, but I also know the situation from the law. There is no way for them to change this that will actually make a difference.
Okay, listen, you're a great lawyer. I agree with a lot of what you've just said. I will give Bobby definitely more of the benefit of the doubt than Trump. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, so would I.
That's the way I lean. But
I agree.
That is the way I lean, and I can't argue with most of what you said. You're on the money. Can I just say something? So, what did you sacrifice in your personal life, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, as I went through COVID, I became probably the most well-known and in-demand attorney on the planet. My phone didn't stop ringing. There was a time that I was sitting here and I was emptying my voicemail, and before I could empty my voicemail, it was full again. That's how during COVID, I had a couple clients that gave me some money for stuff. I didn't charge for my work. I gave it all away. I had one of our biggest cases, the one that had the most profound impacts, probably shut down the vaccine mandate. One of our clients on that was helping to fund us on that, they quit paying. The rest of it was funded out of donations in my pocket. I did most of this without pay or just based on crowdfunding. Over 5 years, our budget is less than most small law firms make in 1 year. We've done everything for nothing. It's damaged my family. It's damaged my financially. I mean, we're terrible. I mean, we worry about paying our bills on a monthly basis. We have sacrificed the time that my kids are 12 and 15. Before COVID, I was the dad who was at every soccer practice. Now I get maybe an hour a day. I call my kids from the road to say prayers at night. I don't, it's like, they understand that dad's out fighting bad guys and I'm trying to make sure they got a future, but I'd love to see them growing up. I've sacrificed, it's had an impact on everything, from family to financial to professional. I mean, the tax I've gotten professionally are as much as everybody else has gotten. We've given everything that we can give to this, and we're going to keep giving more because, like I said, I would fall on the sword for this. I will die on this hill if I have to. It doesn't matter what we have to do to save these kids Doc, during COVID, since I was the first lawyer that was really doing anything, I became super well known. And so everybody whose loved one was getting murdered in a hospital called me. Everybody wanted me to save their loved ones. And so we saved as many as I could. We were on the phone nonstop. But here's the thing. Everybody thought that they needed a lawyer to save their loved one. So the problem is that from the day that you entered the hospital with COVID till the day that you were dead was, depending on the state, 12 to 16 days, right? So you had maybe 2 weeks. And the hospital protocols were designed to murder you. We know that. We can show that. And but you had 2 weeks. Well, you can't write up and file a lawsuit in 2 weeks. It's almost impossible. So we would argue with the hospitals. We'd fight with the hospitals. We'd call the hospitals. We'd talk to their counsel. We'd do everything we could. And we would do everything. But especially the people who were calling me from out of state, because if I wanted to help out of state, I had to use a lawyer that was local, because I'm not licensed in every state. I can only, I'm only licensed in Ohio. So for the lawyers that were, for people that were calling me from out of state, not only did I have to find a lawsuit, but I had to find a lawyer locally that I could work with who because I had to have local counsel. So this whole thing was an absolute nightmare. So we had person after person after person calling, and we would fight hard. I'd argue with these general counsels for the hospital and all these different guys, argue, fight. And then, 2-3 days later, I'm sorry, my loved one's dead. You don't have to fight anymore. And this happened over and over again. I got to tell you, Doc, probably one of the most painful and difficult things I've ever experienced in my life. I would passionately fight for these people, get them out. I would say maybe 10 to 20%. Maybe 10 to 20% of the people that we tried to get out of the hospital were we successful in doing. And I didn't even take these people as clients. I didn't take a penny. I don't even have records. I just call to try and help people out, right? Hey, can we get this guy out of the hospital because A, B, and C, right? I was helping as many as I could, over and over. People dying, and we saved some of them, but maybe 10 to 20%. And I got to tell you, Doc, one of the most painful things that I've experienced as a human, this will never leave me. Worse than the financial pain, worse than the attacks, the public attacks, the private attacks, the personal attacks. I mean, I actually had people. I had one time I had guys show up at my house that followed me to my local gym, to try and intimidate me. I mean, I'm a big, scary dude. I don't get intimidated too easy. So that's how bad it was, with people showing up at my house.
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links, which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Loved one. I'll do everything I can, right? A few days later, these people that have so much faith call you back. Listen, Tom, you're a hero. Thank you so much for all you did. My sister, my brother, my wife, my son, my daughter are dead. Thank you for everything that you tried to do. You don't feel much like a hero when that's happening. You don't. And the praise for being called a hero, it was painful. It's still painful. On a personal level, I mean, listen, I signed up to be an attorney. I never knew I was going to. I mean, I was a fireman when I was a young guy, and I know what it means to lose someone that you're trying to save. But, I opened a quiet little law practice so that I could, do my thing and watch my kids grow up. I didn't know I was going to be, that my work was going to be life or death. On a policy level, when I'm fighting, and we're talking about, banning mRNA and stuff, that's for millions of people. And when you start talking about policy, you don't realize the personal impact. Yeah. But I saw the personal impact. And to this day, I get the calls, hey, I'm vaccine injured. Let me tell you my story. I'm this, I'm that. What can we do about it? But the people who believed so much in me that I couldn't save their loved ones, man, that cuts deep, Doc. I mean, real deep. And like I said, I signed up to be a lawyer. I didn't know I was going to ever have to think about that sort of thing.
Absolutely. But listen, I don't want to do a hard stop. I need to ask you a favor.
Yeah.
Just a quick favor.
No worries.
No, I appreciate it, buddy. I very much appreciate it. So basically, on my drive to the school to pick up the kids, I was thinking about what you said. Look, you know what? I know one thing for sure, Tom. I think you're a man of honor. In the past, a man's word was everything, and I think in today's day and age, we've lost that. That bond. You know, a man's word, that was everything. If your word wasn't worth anything, you were an outcast. You were nothing. You were nobody. That's how important your man's word was. It allowed you to function in a society. Today, that's gone out the window. Gone out the window. But you're a man of your word. You're a man of integrity and honor. You're a God-fearing man. I'm not religious, but I am a God-fearing man. And I recognize one when I see one. And I just want to say I love you. I love the work you've done. I love the sacrifices you've made. And if you don't get the rewards in this world, you will certainly get it in the world hereafter. So don't worry about that. But listen, I was thinking about stuff that you're saying about Trump and Bobby. Look, I'm not in their shoes. I don't know what they're going through. I totally get it. One thing for sure is I don't trust any politician. I just don't.
Nope.
And I will give them, not one bit. And I will give them a little bit of, you know, that we don't know what goes behind the scenes. I think, but we serve a purpose. Certainly, you know, the way I'm putting their feet to the coal face and fire and, you know, not letting them off the hook is we need some people like that. We can't just all go, oh, our guys are in now. It's all good. We can go back to just watching Netflix and eating burgers and drinking shake. You know, some of us have to make sure we put a little bit of pressure on them to say, look, we're watching you. We're watching you. And you need to up your game. And right now they're still falling quite short. So anyway, I want to move on from that. What I wanted to ask you is very quickly, because time is of the essence, you need to go, and I've got now kids around the house, so I don't like working when the kids are here. Have you ever come across communitarianism and communitarian law?
I've heard of the term. I have never looked into it.
Can I ask a favor? For our second podcast, can you? A good resource is Lark in Texas, a Lark in Texas. If you look it up, he's written tons about it. And I think it will really open your eyes, because basically a lot of our laws are now communitarian, and it's about that greater good. It's about, you know, you've got freedom of speech, but as long as it doesn't violate public health policy, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, the double speak. We will grant you freedoms, but we can take them away when we want to. These are
also
not
called communism, right?
Exactly.
So that's the foundation. So public health, I got a theory, Doc, and I don't know if you've ever heard this.
Yeah.
Public health is founded on kind of essentially communist principles. And let me explain why. So when we look at what public health is a great tool if it's limited only to education. When public health is empowered to make decisions, then it's inherently communist. And what I mean by that is this. Each of us have our own individual rights and responsibilities and duties to protect and preserve our own health. If someone can determine what I need to do for your health, then that is for the collective good and not based on my individual rights. My individual rights with regards to my body, my life, and what I do and how I choose to live it, if those are limited, that's inherently, especially for the greater good, that's inherently communist. This whole concept of being able to regulate and do things for the public good is really the foundation of communism. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have certain laws. I mean, certainly I want a regulation that says that you have to wash your hands before you go back into the restaurant kitchen and cook for me if you've gone to the bathroom. I mean, there are certain things that we can all get behind, but public health is always suspect. And anything can be called a health issue. I mean, they've tried to call gun violence a health issue. That's not a health issue. If I shoot you, that's not a health issue. That's me being an idiot. That's me breaking a law.
But we can agree that climate change is a health issue.
The weather outside, you know, especially with what we're seeing with the chemtrails and what they're doing, you know, the weather modification, geoengineering stuff. You know, they want to call that a health issue. It's I think the only health issue we're getting from it is when they spray poison in our sky, it eventually falls on our heads. But you know, they tie everything to public health. They can tie anything. And so when you give public health authorities the ability to regulate or to manage law or manage your rights based on the collective good, that is communism. That's
Absolutely.
what it is.
So there is no such thing as public health. I've now come to realize that there's individual health, and everyone's health is determined by their experience, their trauma, their environment, their diet, their sleep, their EMF exposure. It's so many variables, genetics, everything. And to just say there is a public health and a public blanket policy is just nonsensical. It's draconian, it's centralized, it's authoritarian. But communitarianism, while it shares the word communism kind of, and has certainly a lot of beliefs to it, is almost like a ramped up communism version 2.0, and it's a political and social philosophy, and it kind of sugarcoats the communist ideas, and it's even more sinister because it presents itself not as communist and socialist, but as a benevolent, kind force. The rights of the individual must be balanced against the needs of the community. You do care about the community, don't you, Tom? I mean, you want to be part of the community.
No, I don't.
You, Tom?
I care about the individuals in the community.
Exactly, but you see what I mean? It's couched in a way that always is our common good. We're doing things for the whole, and it's always presented as a middle way between capitalism and socialism. That's what it basically. They're trying to present it between the two, and you might even argue.
Never.
I know
that's never correct.
I know.
It's always this is a dressed up communist propaganda tool. That's all it is. They've used, if you look to the way that the Soviet Union implemented communism, if you look at the way communism is ushered in everywhere, they always try and dress it up as something it's not, for the greater good, for the good of the worker, for the good of this, for the good of, but it's still communism, and it still results in millions of people dying, and it still results in the only people being wealthy, the government leaders, everybody else is servants. That is communism. That is communitarianism. You can call it what you want. You can dress it up. You can, to coin a phrase, you can put lipstick on a pig, right? It doesn't matter what you do. You can polish that turd of communism all you want to polish it. It's still a big brown stinky turd.
Yeah, well, and this is the thing. And I think it's being used now as a Trojan horse to bring in the technocratic top-down governance and the erosion of the individual rights, all under the guise of the common good, the public health, blah, 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 blah. And I would argue that the communists never went away, and they just rebranded themselves. And what we're seeing now is communism 2.0, and it says fusion of fascism, technocracy, communism, communitarianism. It's just one big blob. And what it is centralized top-down control. We at the top know best. We at the top want to have the power and the control and eat meat and steak and fly our private jets and have our super yachts, while all you billions of plebs will do as you're told because you're ignorant and stupid and just useless eaters, and you'll eat the gloop and the insect burgers, and you won't be able to travel very far, and you'll need your carbon credits, and you'll live in your digital gulags. That's what it is, basically. That's where we're heading. And that's why I'm fighting desperately hard now. And I think one of the hills that we need to die on is this digital ID. So you got the real ID in the States, we've got the brick card in the UK. They're going to sell it like they did the mRNA shots with fear. So there'll be some massive false flag, there'll be some migrant thing, some terrorist thing, whatever. But it'll be like fear, 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 fear. Oh my God, see what happened. Oh my God, we lost so many lives, blah, blah, blah. We don't know who's around the corner. You need a real ID. And it'll be carrot and stick. If you want to go on the internet, you need to have your ID. If you want a job, you need your ID. If you want bank access, you need your ID. And then the stick will come in. If you don't do this, you're going to have fines, penalties, you go to jail, you'll be cut out of society. But once they get that digital ID, Tom, we're in a real pickle. We're in trouble. Because
100%.
Oh, man. All right, listen, we've got so much more to talk about, but I'm just going to end now with the one final question of the day, which is, Tom, you are on your deathbed and you're about to meet your maker, and all your loved ones are around you, your children, your wife, your family, your friends. Now, before you pass on to the other side, what words of wisdom and advice will you impart on them? What will be your last few words?
I'm sorry. I couldn't do more. I love you. And I'll do my best from the other side to continue fighting.
Oh, dude, that's harsh.
It may be, but, here's the thing. At the end of the day, we got to look at the results. And I'm proud, very proud. I'm a nobody from a little town. And, I've done very big things. Way, way bigger than I ever should have been, through the grace of God. But I've fallen short on certain things. And right now, there's still people dying that I haven't been able to save. There's a lot of people that did die because I couldn't save them. And I need to hold on to that a little bit because it has to drive me. And it needs to continue driving me until I win. Because if I let it go, it's been 5.5 years. I am exhausted. I have prayed for a break. I've prayed for for an opportunity. And the big man told me I got more work to do. So I've got to hold on to whatever I can to keep myself moving until such time as children aren't being killed and raped and murdered, until such time as we've done. Now, I'm trying to find in my personal life a lot more balance, and I'm insisting on a little bit more of that because I have to keep going. But I do know that the greatest regret of my life is that I couldn't do more. I sat here, I would wake up at this very desk with drool on the desk, unconscious because I hadn't slept for days. I did give what I had. I wish it could have been more. Where I've made mistakes, I wish I could have undone them. I've tried to do right by people. I've fallen short in certain cases. But I've always given my best to do this with integrity. I'm very proud of what I've done. But until such time as I don't have to worry about my children's future, your children's future, our children's future, until such time as we've done it, then I still have work to do. And I'll get my peace at some point. But right now, God still got me fighting, and there's lots to be done. And at the end of the day, I'm working to have a more peaceful, balanced life on some levels. But I know what's coming in the next 5 years. I got the whistleblowers, I got the data, I got the this, I got the that. And if we don't step it up right now, it ain't going to be good. And so, at the end of the day, the only real legacy that any man can ever leave are his deeds and his children. So I have to do everything I can to try and make sure that my kids have a future. I got to make sure that my deeds reflect that. And remember, you asked what I would do is say to my loved ones. Well, remember, I had to give up a lot of time and a lot of stuff with my kids. My family's been damaged. My relationships have been damaged. Many things have been damaged because of what I had to do for the greater good. To those people, I owe that an apology. I owe that apology. It's a tough thing. It's not because I regret it. It's because I regret the situation. So I'm proud of who I am. I'm okay with who I am. I've tried to do the right thing to the best of my ability. I've fallen short in a number of instances, but I've done my very best, and I can look in the mirror and know that. But I still would hope that my kids know that I feel bad I couldn't do more to be there more. That when I had to call and ask them how their soccer game went from across the country, that they know that I did that because I love them. So yeah. I mean, it sounds harsh, but that's the reality of what we have to do. And honestly, you asked earlier in the interview, or whether you asked, we were talking earlier in the interview about the rights and obligations and responsibilities of each of us to stand up and to give. Whatever you're doing today, I would urge you, the watcher, ask yourself what you've done for your kid's future. Not just for you, not just to make a living, not to have a better paycheck, not to be able to go out to dinner this weekend. I'm talking about keeping them safe. I'm talking about ensuring that they have freedom. I'm talking about ensuring that they have a real future ahead of yourself. If you can't so much as click share on this show, if you can't so much as post an update, if you can't so much as speak out or find the courage to take a position, then you're part of the problem. And this is really, I've been saying for 4 or 5 years now, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. No, you can do everything.
I'm a nobody. The most important thing I've ever been is a nobody from a small town. If I can do it, you can do it. You just have to be willing. And you don't have to give everything that I've given or the doc's given here. You've just got to be willing to do something. If 100 million people do something, that's everything. You don't have to give everything. Some will have to give everything because that's the way it's got to be. But we can make a difference. We can change the world if everybody will just do something. And it needs to start with as little as a share, a like, a follow, a $5 donation, a support. It doesn't matter what you do. And it's not about money. It's not about popularity. It's about our kids' future. And I would urge everybody to kind of think about that. I pray that the world and that the people and the good people of all places, all colors, all creeds, all religion, there's good people everywhere. I just pray that they wake up and understand that so little can have such a big difference if they would just do that little bit.
Amen. Well, yeah, I can't argue with any of that. I've done a post recently on Substack saying, "Where's my link?" So what do I mean by that? So over the last, very, very quickly, I just want to mention you need to take breaks. So since my shit show had started, for 2 years, I worked every single day. I mean, every single day. I've never worked harder doing this than at any point in my life. Like my time as an orthopedic consultant surgeon has been like playtime compared to this. Day and night, living and breathing. So I got 2 disc prolapses in my neck. I was like in agony 6 months ago, and I feel like my body was telling me, you need to stop. You need to stop. And, I've churned out 350 podcasts in 2 years. You know how much work is involved with that. And I've just been working like a dog. And now I'm like, I need to be strict. I need to turn off, switch off, it's a work in progress. But, in a couple of weeks' time, I'm off for 2 weeks. No laptop, no phone, no nothing. And I'm going to do that at Christmas time, Easter time, and summer holidays. So you need to do that too. Be disciplined and spend time with the wife and the kids. And because otherwise, why are we doing this? But very, very quickly, I was writing in this post, I was speaking to one of my guests about this. We're in the trenches, right? You and I are in the trenches, and we're facing the enemy. And we've got pitchforks and bayonets, rifles, okay? Single shot bayonet rifles. And the enemy, I don't know if you watched the movie Terminator. Have you watched the movie Terminator? Team Satan has these Terminators, and they've got lasers in each hand. Right? Yep. They're firing lasers, and we've got bayonets and pitchforks. And people that come up to me on social media all the time, emailing me, DMing me, writing in the comments, where's the link? Where's the link? That's like someone sliding into the trenches next to me and going, where's the cafeteria? While the robots are coming, shooting their lasers. I'm like, you're not helping. Dude, you're not helping me. Like, if you can't even lift your finger to just click here and there, visit my website, read through this whole Substack, read the show notes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Rumble. All the links are there. The links to your podcast, your Substack are all going to be there. Guys, just scroll down. Like, use this little finger, just read and find the link. Like, you're saying share and repost or mention or donate. Man, some people can't even be bothered looking for the link. They're asking me, like, if I responded to everyone who said, where's the link? I would get no work done in a day. I'd be busy, like, replying to everybody. Like, come on, guys. This is what I mean by everyone needs to up their game. Like, we have Terminators coming for us right now. And you're asking for where the cafeteria is. Come on. Like, enough. Enough is enough. Like, how bad does it have to get for you to realize? So I feel your passion. I totally get where you're coming from, and I hope people listen to this and some of it resonates within them. I have to say, I'm blessed that there's a lot of people who are supporting me, but it is a fraction of those who listen to me. It's a fraction. And, one of the things I always say to people is like, look, just leave a review on Spotify or 5-star review. Because one of the things is people go, what big difference does that make? It's like 2 restaurants. One's busy and one's quiet. Which one do you want to go to? Like the one that's busy, you'll have to wait for half an hour at the door. But you'll still do it because you don't want to go in the empty restaurant. Because why is it quiet? You don't want to go there. Yeah. So if you see a podcast that's got lots of reviews, you go, wow, people really like that. That's really popular. I'm going to check it out. But a podcast that doesn't have very many reviews, they'll be like, give this one a pass. So it's just about raising awareness. It's about making my podcast more accessible to a new audience, a bigger audience. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to raise consciousness awareness, because the more people that know what's going on, the less likelihood of it actually happening. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
But guess what? Like, we are talking about a fraction of people will even leave a review. And it's like, come on, guys. Just please tap the banner. just
I'm grateful
click.
for every single dollar that's given to me, every single like that I get. I mean, I literally want to shake the hand and thank every single person that does it. It's so few that will even do that minimal. But this is the foundation, and this is the reason, going back to the earlier conversation, Trump, Kennedy, whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't have the authority. Even though they've got the authority, at the end of the day, the mob rules. And unless the mob decides that it wants to do something different, the corrupt government will rule, right? So you've got the corrupt government that does what it wants to do, unless the mob says you have no choice but to do the right thing. And the only way to do that is to get people awake, to get them going, to get them moving. I'll take 100 activist followers over 10,000 lukewarm pieces of crap any day. We've got to have people that are willing to fight, that are willing to stand, and willing to do more than just show up. That's it. That's what we're going to do.
We need fire in the belly. The American Revolution was over 2-3% tax, and now it's 40, 50, 60%. Yep. Where's the fire in people's belly? It's like, come on, guys. We need to do something.
We've got many beta wussies out there that are just willing to stand aside and let their families attack, their kids attack. It's just, listen, I'm hard to, on a personal level, I'm probably hard to deal with because I'm pretty ornery. But if the poo hits the fan, you're going to be grateful I'm around, because I will have your back till the bitter end. Unfortunately, that's a characteristic that's lost on too many people. And the importance of it's lost. There's too many people that when it really gets bad, they just walk away. They're afraid. They're weak. They're not strong. And but that's not my nature, right? So I'll stand with you no matter how ugly it gets, because that's just who I am. We need more of that. We need people who will stand. We need some fighters. We need some warriors. We need people to find their inner strength, to recognize that you got to have some peace in your life, but peace without the willingness to fight is fake. It's just fake, because it's not peace. It's just cowardice. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is we got too many people that are too afraid to fight because they say they're protecting their peace. It's not protecting your peace. You're just afraid to fight. And we need people that find some fire, find some willingness to stand, to do what's right. Listen, you don't have to give everything, but you ought to give something.
Amen, brother. Thank you so much. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and/or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.